I'm Chloe. I've got a 7-month-old that's at home with my mum at the moment. He's amazing and a very content baby, but our journey wasn't as straightforward, and I'm going to talk a little bit about colostrum harvesting and how it helped us. So preparing for the birth and the onward journey with our son was daunting but really exciting. We attended pretty much every NHS class that was offered to us, but by far the breastfeeding one was the most worthwhile. It just gave us an insight into things that we had no clue. Someone showing you with a doll or a video really helped us. During the class, one of the other ladies had mentioned about colostrum harvesting and wanted a little bit more information, but it wasn't something that I'd heard of at the time. So the woman taking the class explained to us what colostrum harvesting was, the benefits, and basically how you did it. And she said that downstairs there's a breastfeeding babes office, and they had some kits down there that we could go and get, which I thought was fantastic. I wasn't entirely sure initially whether I'd use it. I wasn't quite convinced on the idea, and I kept reading about it and looking at the pros and cons and became more and more interested in the idea of it. But about 37 weeks I decided to give it a go. And we knew that Henry was going to be a rather large baby. So this definitely solidified the fact that I wanted to try colostrum harvesting. I was starting to get quite anxious and worried about how I was going to feed this giganta baby that they kept telling me I was going to have. So I started off colostrum harvesting. I got very little, but the more I did it, the more I got. And at one point I actually had to go back to the Princess Anne because I'd run out of syringes in my pack, and my GP midwife was like, "Oh, that never happens." So she really encouraged me to go back and get some more. She said, "It's such a good idea, just keep putting it in the freezer." Our son Henry was born on the 10th of March, and he weighed 10 pound 8. He was ginormous. And the first night, Henry was fantastic. He took to breastfeeding really well. He wanted to make it work. I wanted to make it work. But because he was so large, it felt like he never came off the breast. It felt like I was feeding him continuously. And during the day, that's fine, when you've got all the support and my husband was there and everything was great. And then at night, it just felt like an endless night that night. I was mentally so exhausted that I was preparing to ask my husband to bring some formula, just anything to give me a little bit of a break. And I was all ready that morning to go, oh, just pop by Tesco's and get us some formula. And then I remembered about the colostrum. Henry could feed without me having to go through any pain. So we'd feed him on the breast, and then we'd do a syringe, and then I'd feed him on the other breast, and then we'd do another. So it gave my nipples a little bit of respite. But the second reason is one that I think a lot of people could relate to, which is for a first-time mum, you worry endlessly that your baby is getting enough milk. And breastfeeding, there's no way of being sure that they've got this amount or that amount, or whether they're satisfied. So it just meant that every couple of feeds, I knew how much he was getting, put my worried mind at ease, was absolutely brilliant. I strongly believe that colostrum harvesting was one of the main contributing factors to why I successfully breastfed and continue to breastfeed now. The exhaustion after birth and this hunger put a big strain on my body, and if it wasn't for this little liquid gold that I had in the freezer, I'm almost certain I would have introduced formula just in those early days. I can't express how thankful I am that I colostrum harvested for this birth, and I would definitely do it for any pregnancies in the future. So I advocate it, and I think it's brilliant. But that's all from me. A big thanks to anybody who supports women in the early days of breastfeeding and during labour and anything. You know, you do such a wonderful job, and it's wonderful. There seems to be a little bit of stigma around it. When I've said, oh, you know, this is how you do it, and they're like, oh, that seems a bit of a strange thing to do. But I think the more it becomes widely known, the less stigma there will be around it. And I have to say, just in general breastfeeding, I've not had anybody personally, you know, ever come up to me and say anything, and I breastfeed quite openly in public. Everybody either gives you a smile or just politely ignores you, but I do think all the work to do with breastfeeding and the awareness, I just think it's doing such an amazing job to make people more comfortable with it, and it's fantastic.